How you doing? It's IB Nation Sports Talk. He's Jesse. I'm Sean. Stiers squared, as Tommy Guns likes to say. I don't see Tommy in the chat right now, but glad to have you with us, whether you're in the chat or just hanging out right now. We're going to do a little bit of whiteboard tonight. How are you today, Jess?
I'm doing well. I was in Columbus all day yesterday, did the show in Columbus. Watched that Cowboys game with a buddy, stayed the night, and then drove back to Cleveland early this morning, got the work stuff out of the way, and then dove into some whiteboard stuff for the rest of the day. So I'm pretty excited. I say this, I think, every week, but I'm just getting better and better. My whiteboard this week, I'm excited. I got 7 different boards.
7 boards? Man, I don't know how we're going to get to 7 boards tonight. All right. I'll tell you what, you brought up the game last night, and I'm not going to get into the game, but I just want to say this, trying to watch that Cowboys-Chargers Monday night game last night. There's been a lot of complaining, sometimes whining, whatever you want to call it, about officiating at Notre Dame this season. A lot of it justified, don't get me wrong. I'm not, calling anybody out, but after watching that game last night, I think I'm just resigned to the fact now that officiating is just overall bad right now.
It's too subjective.
Yeah, and I don't care what level. It's bad. You're right. There's a lot of subjectivity to it. And, I'm not talking about, this should have been called or, this shouldn't have been called, whatever. 20 total flags were thrown in the Monday night game last night. 20 flags, 20 penalties last night. That's not including, any that were waved off or, they didn't accept or whatever. 20 combined penalties. It just made it a very rough watch last night.
Yeah, it felt like there was no fluidity. And I was texting you last night. I felt like that line judge was just up everyone's butt the entire game. And even Troy Aikman was saying, like, I've seen guys get away with way worse than this. It just felt like that line judge just wanted to prove a point because there was a lot of penalties on both sides where I was like, this just doesn't feel like a penalty to me. And so I just thought that there was a lot of subjectivity and a lot of penalties that could have gone either way, like a lot of 50-50 flags. And it felt like rather than, calling the impactful plays, they got caught up in calling a lot of these miscellaneous penalties, like on that muff punt by the Cowboys. And I'm not just bringing up this one specifically because it benefits the Cowboys, but kind of am. But, first of all, the punt returner doesn't even have a clear space to catch the ball. And then you see on the replay, the gunner has his hand shoved up, the Cowboys cornerback guy, trying to defend, pushing him into the punt returner. So you're committing
could be illegal face to the hands. Yes.
2 penalties in one play that leads to a muff punt. It's just like, how do you not get the big ones right, but you want to, throw a flag every 5 plays because of illegal motion, illegal formation, that kind of stuff.
I'm waving you off right now. Let's not go down this deep rabbit hole because we could stay on this, I think, for like a whole hour if we wanted. And I'm going to push the Joe Moore Award talk to rapid fire because when you told me you've got 7 boards, as you saw USMA 87, he asked if you whiteboarded the whole game. So, but, as Salty says, got a fever. Only prescription is more whiteboard. So bring it on. Let's go. Whiteboard time.
We're going right into this thing, huh?
We're going to do it. We're going to do it. You got 7 boards. So we're going to jump into it. Let's get going. What are we going to start with on the whiteboard today?
So I want to look at on Notre Dame defensively. I looked at the 3 interceptions, Caleb Williams interceptions in the first half, and then a nice stunt game that I liked. And then offensively for Notre Dame, I got into their first touchdown at the goal line, and then I got into the Chris Tyree touchdown. And then I just got into a play that I loved from Jared Parker, just the creativity. I just thought overall it was a really good play. So
All right. You gonna
4
save that for
defensive.
last? Is that going to be your last one?
Yeah, and then 3 offensive. So I guess we will get into some of these Caleb Williams interceptions.
Okay.
And kind of come to some like root analysis of what caused these. So
right.
this is Caleb Williams' first interception. USC has the ball left hash around their 35-yard line. Pre-snap, Notre Dame is showing a cover 2 look. This is a safety. And then this is a safety over here.
I'm not seeing what you're pointing at in terms of what you're saying. This is a safety and this is okay. Now I see. I can barely see your pointer. So to the left there is one of the safeties, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So you have a safety over here to the left, and then you also have a safety over here to the right. So again, Notre Dame pre-snap showing cover 2. Eventually, they're going to roll into cover 1. That's kind of why I have this arrow here. It shows that this safety is rolling to the middle of the field to go to a cover 1 look. And actually, they're going to be man up underneath. And so that's what this kind of orange 8 looks like, is this safety is going to man up with the USC tight end here on the left side. And I forgot to say what formation USC is in. They're on balls on left hash, and then there's a tight end into the boundary, a wide receiver into the boundary, into the field side. You have 2 wide receivers, and then the running back in shotgun. So what happens here is USC shows a pulling motion. So their right guard is pulling to the boundary. They fake a handoff to the running back. And simply what happens here is these box players in safety overcommit to the run play here. And it really allows for this tight end to kind of slip behind coverage, slip behind these linebackers.
Yeah, there was a huge space there. He ended up sitting wide open. There was nobody between him and Caleb Williams, basically. The safety ends, Watson's up behind him.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what this red circle represents here, is where this tight end gets to when the ball is thrown. Literally, the only reason why this play happens is because this right tackle oversets, and what that means is he's getting too far away from the line of scrimmage, so he's oversetting, and then that allows Javonte Jean-Baptiste he's like a heat-seeking missile. He's straight in right now on Caleb Williams, and so while Caleb Williams has this tight end wide open over the middle of the field and Notre Dame's rolling into cover 1 that way, this right tackle oversets. Javonte Jean-Baptiste immediately fires on Caleb Williams. He gets in his face, and then Caleb Williams airmails the throw, and Watts is just behind this tight end in the middle of the field, and he intercepts it. So I guess what I'm getting at on this play is it wasn't a great defensive stunt. It wasn't, some great disguised coverage. It was just great individual performance by John Javonte Baptiste.
You said it right like 3 times before you got to the crucial point. Javonte Jean-Baptiste.
Sorry, I drank a Celsius before this, so I'm like a little fired up right now. Javonte Jean-Baptiste gets into Caleb Williams' face. And now he forces the errant throw, and Xavier Watts makes the play. And again, that's just because Javonte Jean-Baptiste was playing fast, and he forced that high throw over the top.
Yep. All right. Good diagram there. Good way to start us off. John O'Connor says that I remind him of Dr. Johnny Fever. The last time I wore the WKRP shirt, I don't have it on today, but the last time I wore it, everyone was saying Les Nessman. It's like, come on, you can't give me Dr. Johnny. Heavy Early. Remember when he tried to go by Heavy Early? The early, I think it might have been the first ever show. The pilot. Okay, well, I won't get stuck on WKRP. What else you got? We're going to go to another interception here.
Yeah, another interception. Let me make sure that these always get out of the wrong order, so I just need to make sure I have the right one. Okay, here we go. Here is the second one here. So what happens on this play is we have USC middle of the field. They are in a trips left look with the tight end. So they're creating a trips look with the tight end. And then to the right side, you have the running back and a single wide receiver. So this one, I kind of diagrammed a little bit of what's going on as the play is developing. So the first thing that you're going to notice is Notre Dame is bringing a 6-man pressure from the right side of the field. It's a corner fire and a backer fire. So I believe that's Benjamin Morrison, because he's usually the guy manned up on the backside.
It was.
And then
that.
Maris Leofau is coming now. So, and then again, you got to mention too that the 4 defensive linemen are given a strong overlook to the left side of the field. So Maris is going to hit the B gap. The defensive end is going to hit the A gap, and Benjamin Morrison is going to hit the C gap. And so what's going on in this look right now is you can see Notre Dame has 3 guys deep here. So they're running basically a cover 3 here, right? But Caleb Williams, at the snap of this ball, he realistically needed to get the ball out immediately, because if Benjamin Morrison is coming now and Notre Dame's in a cover 3 look, that leaves about 10 yards. Well, by the time the wide receiver runs his route, there should be about 5 yards of separation between that cover 3 safety and the wide receiver, because Benjamin Morrison is coming now. But what ultimately ends up being Caleb Williams' demise here is at the snap of the ball, he's looking left. So he can't get that ball out to the right immediately, because he's just simply looking
in the wrong direction.
Yeah, he's just looking at the left side of the field. So he's not seeing basically that corner vacate his zone. So what happens is this linebacker and corner are condensing the pocket. Caleb Williams has to step up. And as he's stepping up, this deep kind of over route is developing. And again, I kind of talked about how this safety is in a cover 3 look, kind of like a cover 3 man, though, because he's really the only guy that's going to account for this wide receiver on the side of the field, right? And so as this play is developing, our good friend J.D. Bertrand is going to drop into this hole right here. And it's a very critical part of this play that I think goes very unrecognized. Bertrand is sitting in this hole because both of these guys, inside wide receivers for USC, are running crossing routes, right? And so he's basically just passing off crossers in the middle of the field. Well, what J.D. Bertrand does in this case is he gets his hands on this wide receiver as he's crossing his face. And this is a critical moment in the play, because at the point of contact, as Caleb Williams is stepping up to the pocket, as J.D. Bertrand is getting his hands on these wide receiver, the wide receiver has 2 options. He can either continue to drag across the field, or he can get vertical or get depth and try to get past these safeties a little bit. Caleb Williams, as he's stepping up, he thinks that this guy is going to continue, to drag across the field. Instead, he gets depth. And so as Caleb Williams is stepping up, he throws the drag route. Well, no one is there. And then the safety undercuts the route, aka Xavier Watts, right? Because he's playing over top with this guy. He's basically just following him. He sees that this guy gets vertical. Caleb Williams thinks he's running the drag route, throws the drag route as he's stepping up into the pocket, because Notre Dame's bringing a 6-man pressure off the edge. J.D. Bertrand gets his hands on these guys, and Xavier Watts just undercuts the throw. So again, a big point of this route is J.D. Bertrand dropping in his hole and getting hands on this wide receiver, because it forced the wide receiver into a reroute. And the reroute is either get vertical or continue to drag. Caleb Williams thinks he's dragging. Wide receiver goes vertical. Watts undercuts the throw.
Excellent.
So that was, I think, ultimately, so I talked about in the first play what caused the interception. I thought it was just great individual effort. On this second play, I thought it was just a combination of everything. Notre Dame brought a great 6-man pressure. Bertrand drops into the hole, gets another great individual performance, reroutes that wide receiver, and then from there, it's just an undercut from Xavier Watts.
All right. And he takes it. Was it to the 2 or to the 1 yard line? He didn't quite punch it in, but he got, all it took was one play for Audric Estime to score.
One play.
Jeff says that I'm more co-anchor Brian Fantana. I know you think Whiteboard works 60% of the time, every time. That's right. It's got quite an odor as well. Singes the nostrils, if you will. Little Brian Fantana. All right. So that's 2. What's whiteboard number 3 for us today? We're on a
Yeah,
roll.
whiteboard number 3 is
Is this one ready?
yeah, Caleb Williams' third interception in the first half. So there's a lot that's going on in this play in particular, and it's a lot of these USC plays were self-inflicted, but at the same time, it was a combination of Notre Dame performing really well at the same time, and it just USC just didn't do anyone, they just didn't do themselves favors, and it's exactly what happens on this play. So a lot of what I'm doing with these circles that you can see, green represent Notre Dame players, red represent USC players, and they're kind of like the critical players / areas of the field where a lot of things are happening. So when you see this whiteboard, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So we have ball in the left hash. It's a 2x2 formation, meaning there's 2 wide receivers into the boundary, 2 wide receivers to the field side. Caleb Williams is in shotgun, wide receiver to his right. So you have 3, players to the field side. Essentially, this is a 6-man box with Notre Dame, 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers. This look, when USC is going, kind of 2x1 or 3x1 with the quarterback and the running back in the shotgun. This is what has shown to kind of be effective, right? Like you got a 6-man box is enough to kind of slow down the run game, but also be, respectable in the pass game a little bit. So this is very noticeably, cover 1. They just have 1 safety in the middle of the field, and then you kind of have the rest of your corner safety pressed up, manned up. So it's a very obvious pre-snap cover 1 look from Notre Dame. So at the snap of the ball, again, this right guard is pulling into the boundary. Caleb Williams is faking a handoff, giving that kind of RPO look. Left tackle is allowing this defensive end to come free and that's Jordan Botelho. And so this right guard is trying to pull and kick. Ultimately, what happens here is this right guard gets just about to the left guard and he trips and falls. And so that's what I was talking about, of just USC not doing themselves any favors. And so when he trips, Botelho is obviously rushing upfield because he's getting a look. His tackle is blocking down, so he needs to come upfield. This right guard falls. The running back also is taking this fake handoff, so they get a hand on Botelho right in here, but it's not enough to fully block him. So what does that cause? That causes Caleb Williams to now have to roll out into the boundary. And by the time he gets over here, he's 10 yards back from the initial line of scrimmage. And so we've gotten to the part of Jordan Botelho disrupting Caleb Williams to kind of start sprinting out or rolling out into the boundary. And here's another unsung hero of the play, in my opinion. And it's Maris Leofau, because what he's getting, both of these linebackers are getting a pulling guard, right? And so Maris Leofau is going to take, in a scenario where the running back gets the ball, Maris Leofau is playing the upfield shoulder of the running back, and J.D. Bertrand is playing the back shoulder of the running back. And they're both basically staying in phase as this right guard is pulling and as the halfback is, trying to take this handoff, right? So naturally, Maris Leofau and J.D. Bertrand, they're flowing with the play. They're getting downhill. Well, once the play kind of blows up, Caleb Williams is rolling out. Maris Leofau has a decision, and I'm going to assume that Notre Dame's rules were very similar to everything I was ever taught. But essentially, when a quarterback starts a sprint out or a rollout and you've determined that the play is broken down, these 2 linebackers have to come together to make the play. And usually what happens is the near side linebacker, in this case, Maris Leofau, once he notices rollout or sprint out, he immediately has to get pressure and get in Caleb Williams' face now. Because if he doesn't, Caleb Williams can just roll out, set his feet, and make a throw. But with Maris Leofau coming down on him, noticing that it's a rollout, it's a sprint out, a busted play, he is running into Caleb Williams' face now. And then J.D. Bertrand is just going to drop into this hole and make sure that, anything over the middle of the field, that's going to be his responsibility. So Caleb Williams is now rolling out. He sees Maris Leofau coming, sprinting at him. And now is where it gets into trouble for Maris Leofau, because this field side number 2 wide receiver is running a deep drag over the middle of the field. This 2 wide receiver into the boundary is just running a go route. So he's just trying to, basically vacate the defensive back out of there. And then the last wide receiver into the boundary is running a hook. That's important because, by the time this deep drag gets to the other side of the field, Caleb Williams rolls out and throws this ball. He's flipping his hips, and he's throwing back across his body. And so with this hook route, this corner comes off the route, and he easily just jumps, this deep drag route coming across his face. But I don't think this happens unless Maris Leofau gets pressure in his face now, because Caleb Williams can come out, he can set, he can flip his hips. He doesn't have to worry about throwing a ball across his body or potentially airmailing it. He probably hits that drag route right on the money, actually. But Maris Leofau, again, forced a hurried throw. And that was the theme that we talked about last week is, what are you doing to force Caleb Williams into some throws, essentially? So that's what ended up happening on the third interception.
Well, and that's why, even though you've kind of pointed to, well, some of this stuff was self-inflicted by USC or whatever, it was still ultimately about Notre Dame's defensive players, as you pointed out on these 3 plays, Notre Dame's defensive players getting that pressure on Caleb Williams.
Oh, it's great individual effort every play.
Yeah, exactly. Getting the pressure, making him have to make those decisions and get the ball out quicker than he wanted to get it out. It's exactly what we pointed out last week. How are you going to make Caleb Williams, how are you going to get him off schedule? You got to make him make the decisions quicker than he wants to make decisions. Otherwise, he's just going to, he could have felt that pressure and he might have, dodged, ducked, dipped, dived, and dodged right out of there and just eluded the pocket like we saw him do so many times last year. But Notre Dame got it on him when they needed to get it on him, and they made 3 big mistakes. And as we pointed out on yesterday's show, they turned all 3 of those mistakes into touchdowns. The offense did, which was huge as well. So those are the first 3 boards, the 3 interceptions that we start with. Where are we moving next?
We are moving to this is just more of a defensive stunt. That's what it's like. Outside of the interceptions, it's hard to kind of figure out what's important after that. I just thought that this stunt ended up being really nice, and again showed just outstanding individual effort here again by Notre Dame. And so this is very late in the game. This is 38-20, 5 minutes left. It's 4th and 9. USC has the ball. They're right around their own 22, 23-yard line. Ball is on the right hash. They have running back and tight end into the boundary, and they have trips over to the field side. And then what's important to kind of show in this look is just look at Notre Dame's box or 6-man configuration that they got going on right now. So this is Javonte Jean-Baptiste. This is Howard Cross. I forget who this guy is. This is Benjamin Morrison lined up right here.
Again, I can barely see where you're pointing, so I don't know if maybe there's a way to mark these guys as you point out who they are.
Oh, yeah. Give me 1 second. That's helpful because I need to know feedback-wise if these things can be seen. So this guy is Javonte Jean-Baptiste.
Okay.
This guy is Howard Cross.
Okay.
This is J.D. Bertrand. This is Benjamin Morrison. This is Jalen Sneed. And then I can't remember. Oh, this is Maris Leofau. This is Maris Leofau here on the edge.
Okay.
So to go through them again, you have Howard Cross. Then you have Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and you have Howard Cross. You have Jalen Sneed technically playing like a inside defensive tackle. You got Benjamin Morrison to his right, his left, man on man with that tight end, and then on the very outside is Maris Leofau, and then Bertrand is the linebacker, kind of standing back over the top. But the reason why I like this is, again, look at this configuration that Notre Dame is presenting to the offensive line. You have 4 guys over here in this, area, and you just don't know what's going to happen, right? And so Jalen Sneed immediately bull rushes upfield. Maris Leofau is pushing upfield, kind of across the face of the tight end / on the outside shade of the right tackle. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is crashing down. Howard Cross is working across the face of the guard. He's crashing down. And so what happens is, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Cross, and Snead just bull rush these guys. They physically bull rush these guys, and so they're pushing the pocket into Caleb Williams here. J.D. Bertrand fakes like he's blitzing, and then he loops behind Howard Cross, so now he's into the party over here between Jean-Baptiste and Howard Cross. Maris Leofau acts like he's coming, and then he drops off too into kind of like a spy look. But ultimately, what ends up happening here is there's just 4 guys on the quarterback, and it's a party at the quarterback, right? Like, it's just, again, tremendous individual effort combined with a really nice stunt up front, with some of your, Jalen Snead, Maris Leofau, J.D. Bertrand, all on one side of the field. And on the other side, it's Howard Cross, Javonte Jean-Baptiste. They just work these guys, and then you stunt Bertrand over. So you're hoping that Caleb Williams steps up into that pressure and steps right into the lap of J.D. Bertrand. And if he gets away from that, Maris Leofau is also, rushing and then peeling back into a spy look. And so in case they get away from all of that that's already going on, you have Maris Leofau as kind of a security blanket or spy at the end of the day. So again, not some crazy tremendous play, but I just love the individual effort and the Al Golden's creativity to get kind of these guys, Maris Leofau, J.D. Bertrand, and Jalen Snead, into a stunt together on the field. And, this is a big sack. It ultimately was kind of the exclamation point on the game, in my opinion, on fourth down.
For sure. And they end up, they showed that they were bringing 5, but then, as you said, Maris Leofau drops off after showing that he's going to rush. They showed they're bringing 5. They brought 4. And like you said, fourth down, come up with a big sack. That's, and that was part of the thing that Marcus Freeman talked about after the game. We couldn't just rush 3 guys. They had to bring much more than just 3 guys, whether it was 4, 5, 6, whatever it happened to be. And they just, a lot of different looks, showed a lot of heat, brought a lot of pressure on Caleb Williams all night long. Just didn't just sit back there, try to prevent him from picking him apart. They brought pressure on him, and boy, did it pay off.
Yeah, it 100% paid off. And it just, USC really had, at the end of the day, no sort of response for it, right? It's like they completely game planned for something else. Notre Dame came out, and they just couldn't adapt quickly enough. And by the time that they didn't at all. And then at halftime, when you were like, oh, they really need to, it felt kind of too late at that point. And USC just kind of kept digging themselves deeper and deeper into that hole. So that concludes defensively where I'm at for this game. And yes, we are up to 4 boards with 3 boards left.
That was, 4 down. 3 to go. So we got 3 offensive boards coming up now.
3 offensive boards coming up. And the first one is the touchdown to Jabron Payne. And, on paper, it doesn't look like much, but this is a touchdown off a turnover. It sets the tone early. You grab a 7-0 lead at home against an undefeated rival and a team that's ranked ahead of you. So, again, I did some pre-snap, green is Notre Dame, red is USC. Green circles mean, players that are impactful on this play. And then if you see a green or red circle floating, that's kind of, where the play ends up developing at. So we have the ball. Notre Dame has the ball around the 5-yard line, kind of center of the field, a little bit towards the left hash. They are going with tight end trips to the right side, meaning that they have a tight end on the line of scrimmage, and they have 2 wide receivers split out that side. They also have, Sam Hartman's in shotgun with Jabron Payne split out to his right, and then they have 1 wide receiver over to the left side of the field. So what happens here is immediately on this play, and what sets this up is Notre Dame's entire offensive line is kind of, I don't know the technical terminology for offensive line, but they're basically all blocking to the right. They're all sliding to the right here, right? And so what this play is set up to do is the defensive end or the linebacker that I have circled here that's kind of in the middle of the field, one of 2 things needs to happen on this play. Either this defensive end peels and takes the running back into the flat, or the linebacker notices man-to-man and he takes the running back out of the flat. And so Hartman's read is, what are these guys doing? And so immediately this defensive end is bull rushing. This linebacker steps up. Your entire line is sliding to the right. So it looks like you're about to throw to the right side where you have 3 wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Your running back leaks over into the flat. Jaden Greathouse is just running like a 2-step slant route, and his job is just to wall off anyone that comes over here. Maybe that's a safety over the top. Maybe that's a linebacker over the top. Whoever's coming this way, his job is ultimately just to wall them off. No one accounts for Jabron Payne out of the backfield. Again, the D end either needs to peel into the flat or the linebacker needs to take him man-to-man to the flat. Sam Hartman notices that. And I think the unsung part of this game, or part of this play that goes unnoticed, is this defensive end is still bull rushing Sam Hartman right now. Sam Hartman still has to throw a ball either over or around this defensive end that's barreling down on him. He makes a beautiful throw, an extremely athletic throw. He gets the ball to Payne, obviously over here in the flat. And then I thought Jabron Payne, 1, made a really good catch, and 2, he immediately got vertical into the end zone. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't try to kind of peel this ball off and fight, basically race this kind of defensive back over to the corner of the end zone. He caught the ball, put his foot in the ground, got vertical, and got his body into the end zone. So I just thought that was a tremendous play design overall by Notre Dame, because they influenced these defensive ends and linebackers, and they just didn't make a decision.
Yeah. And what did we talk about last week? Tendencies Notre Dame was showing that they needed to be able to break to have success. And that's to me what this play did, because more times than not, when Jabron Payne is on the field, and look, they're in an and goal situation. They're inside the 10-yard line. They're knocking on the door of the end zone. So you bring Jabron Payne in. What's USC think that Jabron Payne is going to do if he's in the game? Try to do a short yardage run somewhere between the tackles. And then, like you said, they used the offensive line. They shifted away from where Jabron Payne was flowing out of the backfield. He flows through that B gap, and then boom, it's just an easy little toss for Sam Hartman, even though, it ended up looking maybe a little bit more complicated than it was. But again, they broke tendency, flip a little touchdown pass to Jabron Payne. He only had 7 receptions all season going into the game. So they don't throw to Jabron Payne that much, but they did there, and they get their first touchdown out of it. I thought it was again, nothing overly complicated, but they broke tendency right away with that play, and they scored a touchdown out of it.
100%. And that's why this play was ultimately effective. So next play I'll get into, everyone probably thinks it's the Tyree touchdown. Well, actually, let's do the Tyree touchdown.
Oh, okay.
And again, this is this play is really cool to me, because it felt like, we talked about last week, what if Jordan Faison was going to play in this game? He was coming off scholarship. What does that mean for this offense? How are you going to use him? Because now he's a scholarship player. And so my solution was find a way to have Chris Tyree and Faison on the field at the same time. And what do we get here? And this is honestly one of my favorite Notre Dame formations as well, a formation that's kind of had a lot of success. It's called trips closed. Notre Dame has the ball on the left hash. Tight end is into the boundary, so he is what is closing the formation. And then you have trips over to the field side. Sam Hartman is in shotgun with the halfback also split out to his right. So you have a running back split out to the right, and you have 3 wide receivers to the field side also split out. And so what makes this play so effective for Notre Dame is, first of all, they do a little play action, right? And so while it doesn't seem like much, a little play action gets the corners to bite a little tiny bit, right? Just enough to take a step forward. That's really kind of all that's needed. So I have a circle around the number 3 wide receiver. That's Faison. I have a circle around the number 2 wide receiver. That is Chris Tyree. Ultimately, what happens here is Faison at the snap of the ball is, as you see, is running about a 10 to 12 yard out route. He's getting depth. And the reason why this is important is because Chris Tyree is also running a deep post route or a deep, post route, but he's he's working back towards the middle of the field after being split out to the right side, but he's making his break also at 10 to 12 yards. So both wide receivers are making their break at 10 to 12 yards. Why this is so important is because you can see I have a floating circle here and an arrow going each way. Well, when both wide receivers are making their break at 10 to 12 yards, you're forcing this safety to make a decision. Do I come underneath on the phase on under route, or do I go deep with the Chris Tyree post route that's going over the middle of the field? As soon as Hartman sees this safety go flat, meaning he's coming flat onto this, this out route, 10, 12 yard phase on out route, he notices that immediately, and he knows he's about to cut this ball loose to Chris Tyree that's got man-on-man coverage going across the middle of the field. So that's, again, this is what we talked about. How are you going to have Faison and Tyree on the field, and how are you going to force the defense to basically pick one guy or the other? Are you going to step down on Faison, or are you going to go over top and help on the Chris Tyree route? Well, he steps down on the deep out route, and the rest is really history from there. Chris Tyree runs a beautiful route. Sam Hartman throws a beautiful ball. He lays it up to Chris Tyree, and they score a important touchdown right after USC puts some points on the board. But again, this is all predicated by putting this safety into a bind. Both of these wide receivers making their routes, cutting out of their routes at 10 to 12 yards in depth. And the safety has to make a decision now. Am I going with this route, or am I going with that route? And you just throw the ball to the guy that he doesn't decide to go to.
Yeah. And ultimately, with 4 games to go in the regular season and 1 bowl game to go, this is kind of how I think that potentially maybe Notre Dame's offense can sort of get unstuck, in terms of what's going on with the consistency of the passing game. If you can line these two up together more often, you're doing the simple thing like you just talked about. You're making the safety have to make a decision. Which guy am I going to take? And either one of these guys can burn you with their speed. And then even if they're going to play, a couple safeties deep then, and you've got both of those guys together, it also potentially, I think, can open up some stuff for the outside receivers who have ultimately been so ineffective, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, what happens here is, Notre Dame's going to put this play on tape now, right? And so, like you talked about, I think everyone will get caught up with these two inside guys. Well, you still have Rico Flores running a go route on the outside, and you still have Mitchell Evans kind of running a deep out route himself. So even if these plays get, kind of tied up, or they maybe compensate to make sure that these, that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, well, that still allows you to get maybe a one-on-one matchup here with Flores, or a one-on-one matchup here with Mitchell Evans on an undersized.
Or maybe safety. It's Greathouse or Jaden Thomas or whoever it happens to be. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So that is number 6.
1 more to go.
1 more to go. And this is just a fun play. I gave Jared Parker a lot of crap, after the Louisville game, probably deservingly so. Right. But you also need to recognize and give his flowers too, at the same time. And that's what I'm going to do when I show this play. So I can't remember, where Notre Dame was at this point of the field, or sorry, at where this was in terms of game. I think it was like just to start the second quarter, I want to say. But anyways, what's happening here is Notre Dame has the ball in the left hash right around the 42-yard line. They have trips to the right side, or the field side of the field. And then into the boundary, you have the running back split out in shotgun, and then you have a single wide receiver also split out to the boundary. So if these lines don't make a lot of sense, I will make them make sense right now. Essentially what's happening is Notre Dame is running a double screen concept, right? And so right now at the snap of the ball, the running back is flaring out into the boundary, basically, looking like a screen. This wide receiver is just trying to run off this defensive back because obviously they're setting up a screen. And then your left tackle and your left guard are taking about one step back, and then they're pulling out into the boundary to be lead blockers for your running back in a running back screen. So if you look at the whiteboard right now, you see I have two circles around two players. I have a circle around the defensive end into the boundary and a circle around the linebacker into the boundary. And so what they're looking for right now at the snap of the ball, Sam Hartman's taking the ball and he's looking left. And if one of these guys, defensive ends or linebacker, commits to the screenplay over here, meaning, they flash that way or show that way, he's immediately going to look to the field side and see, what's going on in this screenplay. And so I'll go over the field side now. The number one wide receiver, I believe this is a tight end. I'm about 100% sure it's a tight end. He's just running about a 4 or 5 yard out route. And essentially all he's doing that for, and why it's a tight end, is he's a bigger body. And he's going to seal off anything that comes this way. This is Chris Tyree. He takes a couple steps and then peels back into a tunnel screen. And then your number one wide receiver, again, he's just running off that defensive back, just trying to vacate less players for Notre Dame to block, right? And so, and then again, on this play, your right tackle is, basically setting back. And then your center and right guard are also going to take about a one step set. And then the center is looking to peel off and wall off anything backside. And then your right guard is peeling off and is eventually going to be a lead blocker up the seam for Chris Tyree when he gets this route. So there are two screenplays built into the singular play here. So Sam Hartman takes the snap. He looks left. He's reading the defensive end and linebacker. If they show any commitment towards the running back screen over here, he's immediately going to look to the right, and he's going to throw the tunnel screen. And that's what he does. Chris Tyree catches the ball, and he runs right up the seam for about, I think, like 15, 20 routes. Or 15, 20 yards. I was going
to say, I think it was around 16 yards or something like that was the gain, if I remember right. But
yeah.
But
it's just, again, it's cool that this play had two options built into it at the same time. And you're allowing Sam Hartman to make a read basically on the snap of the ball, noticing if anyone's going to cover this wide receiver screen. Okay, that's covered. I'm immediately flipping back to the field side, and I'm throwing Chris Tyree the tunnel screen. Now he does that, and they get upfield for about 16 yards.
Excellent stuff. Salty is requesting that you whiteboard Price's, Jadarian Price's kickoff return. He wants to see every single yard of it. That was something too. It was good to see they really needed that, especially the way the game went. They needed that momentum. But I thought that it was we started to see Jared Parker get back to some of the more creative stuff that we saw from him earlier in the season, with some of that design right there, like you were talking about. Some of it more simple than others, but really, not overly complicated. But it's interesting that same play, they had screens set up on both sides, and essentially all Hartman had to do is make one quick read and then decide, okay, are they committing or not? They are, so I'm going to the other side. And there it was, and it ended up being a nice, pretty sizable gain for Chris Tyree.
Well, it's just an easy way to get 15 yards. It's just not a laborious 15 yards. And I think that's the type of stuff that you're looking for, is how can we get yards efficiently? And it doesn't need to be this crazy concept or design. You know what I mean? It can be simple stuff like this.
Yes, it's the kind of stuff that we've talked about, that you can get Chris Tyree more involved in the passing game. A guy with his skill, speed, and ability. Great stuff, as always, Jesse, with the whiteboard. Golf clap. Well done. Much appreciated. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for the fire.
So we didn't get to this one in the opening segment because you did have so much whiteboard today. Notre Dame's offensive line named to the Joe Moore Award Midseason Honor Roll today. The Joe Moore Award voting committee judges solely on 6 criteria: toughness, effort, teamwork, consistency, technique, and finishing. So what do you think? Joe Moore Honor Roll, Midseason Honor Roll for Notre Dame's offensive line.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame definitely is one deserving to be on this midseason honor roll. I think that they have one of the better offensive line units in the country, obviously. But I guess the number one thing that you would look at is the game that they let their team down the most was ultimately the game that they lost, and I'm specifically talking about Louisville because I thought the offensive line was great against Ohio State. They got a lot of push. They did what they needed to. But ultimately you could put, at least 25, 30% of the blame in the Louisville game on the Notre Dame offensive line. And we know they weren't healthy. We know there were guys rotating in and out a lot, but I mean, even like guys like Joe Alt flat up missed blocks. Right. And so it was just a bad day overall. And I think out of the 8 games, that is their only mulligan so far. And they've played really, really well the rest of the season. Did you happen to see who else is on the midseason honor roll?
I don't know why you're asking me this question. I know Tennessee is on there. I'm trying to think. There were a bunch of tweets that I saw. Let me see if I can find.
I know list. Duke is on there. Clemson is on there. Michigan is on there.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. Overall, there's 6, 8, 9, 10.
So here's
13, 18.
Air Force, which just joined the top 25 this week. Clemson, Duke, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Kansas State, Kentucky, Louisville, LSU, Miami, Michigan, Missouri, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon are some of them who are on there. Texas is on there. Central Florida is on there. Washington and Wyoming also on there, as is Oregon State and Penn State. So some pretty notable ones.
Yeah, I think the most I guess the reason why I was asking you that, I was setting up my next point. Clemson being on there is a little worrisome for me because that's going to be a tough road environment atmosphere. And if Notre Dame's offense is going to keep being stagnant like they have been of the last 3-4 games, I just think that Clemson game is going to be a lot more uncomfortable than what people probably want if they can't figure it out offensively. It would remind me of another stalemate kind of Duke matchup, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Stymie says Colorado, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Jokes.
Yes. Good jokes. They've been solid. We obviously haven't been able to watch all of these other teams game in and game out to see how they perform and how some of the other lines perform. I guess I was a little bit surprised to see him, and it's probably maybe a little bit of recency bias because of what happened against Louisville. Like you mentioned, the fact that they only ran the ball for 44 yards on 28 carries against Louisville. And really, even against Duke, you take out the Audric Estime touchdown run at the end, and it's 31 carries for 146 yards. So that's not a lot. Even against USC, 125 yards on 29 carries. So they definitely played better against USC than they played against Louisville, but at the same time, I think they should have played even better than that. Now, they have only allowed 11 sacks this year, and it's interesting that 9 of those 11 sacks came in 2 games combined, Louisville and North Carolina State. One of the better defenses that they've seen this year in NC State, one against a defense that really had no business dominating the way they have. So, again, when you look at those criteria that I talked about, toughness, effort, teamwork, consistency, technique, finishing, I think the consistency and the technique, a little bit, room for improvement here down the stretch. And you're absolutely right about that Clemson game. Some things need to be addressed, I think, getting into that Clemson game. They showed signs of getting things going again this last week against USC. Need to keep seeing some improvement going forward. Now, I'm going to throw one at you here that I didn't have on the list because it came in late this afternoon. Saturday's Notre Dame USC game had an average of 6.8 million viewers. According to NBC, it's the most watched Irish home game against their rival, like Notre Dame USC game, since the 2005 Bush Push game. All 4 Notre Dame primetime games in this last month have drawn an average of at least 5 million viewers. What do you think about that?
I think that obviously that's great overall, and it speaks to the brand of Notre Dame, and it speaks to just the high level games that Notre Dame is going to play year in and year out. And when you bring a USC to Notre Dame Stadium, they're undefeated, they're a top 10 opponent. Notre Dame's coming off the back end of a really tough stretch. I just think it's again just shows how much viewership Notre Dame is able to draw in. And I think that it's something that's ultimately always going to continue. And the reason why Notre Dame is always going to have the strong arm on NBC in any of these contract negotiations.
And as a couple of guys, Stymie and Josh, are chiming in about the value in the TV contract, it's absolutely right. And you throw in the fact that USC is moving to the Big Ten next year. And it's no surprise. Notre Dame versus Ohio State, Notre Dame versus USC, the two most viewed games of the season in terms of the Fighting Irish. And, for the NBC contract, because you got Tennessee State. I guess Navy was on NBC, and that drew a decent rating as well. And of course, Central Michigan was on Peacock. But I think it's only going to be good. And I think that it's from the Notre Dame NBC perspective, especially if USC can stay where they are right now and continue to be at least a top 25 program year in and year out, and Notre Dame stays in that echelon, that's going to be really good for NBC. And it's going to be really good for Notre Dame as well, because you've got that built-in Notre Dame USC, Notre Dame Big Ten matchup that NBC is going to be able to televise both home and away. So that's going to be good for everybody. And I think it's just more ammunition for Notre Dame going forward. The fact that when you get these marquee kind of games, it's people are going to watch them. Now, the downside is you don't have much of a home schedule next year in terms of marquee opponents. It's going to be a little bit down next year, but you keep kind of getting some of those marquee games on there, and it's going to be nothing but good news for Notre Dame in terms of the TV contract negotiation going forward. So Marcus Freeman was asked after the win over USC about bouncing back. They did it twice last year, and here's what Freeman had to say about bouncing back.
Weeks that you lose are really long, especially around here. The expectation that you win every game you play. And I know the hours are the same, but the weeks that you win, they seem to go by really fast, and the next opportunity is here. But it is what it is. You know what I mean? And you have to pick your head up and go back to work. Adversity is a part of life. I told our guys, here's the word I use. I said, I want to be an anti-fragile program. I told them this on Monday. We have to be an anti-fragile program. What does that mean? We just didn't get through it. We didn't get through adversity. We are better because of the adversity that we face. That's easy to say. The challenge is do the things that it takes to make sure we're better, and that's what these guys, these coaches and players did.
Some new messaging there for Marcus Freeman, anti-fragile program. So what do you think about that new messaging for Marcus Freeman about being an anti-fragile program?
Yeah, and first of all, I love that messaging. And like you said, it was something new of like those kind of, you add it to maybe one of the list of cliches that Marcus has kind of put out there since being head coach at Notre Dame. But I like the mindset of being anti-fragile, because that means you can't allow things to break you. Fragile things means that you're easily breakable, right? And so Notre Dame can't be easily breakable. And ultimately what he's getting at is they have to be resilient, right? Like while the sting of losses can affect you, you can't be fragile and allow it to break you. You have to learn from it and allow it to teach you something and ultimately get better from it. And I think that's the mark of a great head coach, in my opinion, because you're going to suffer tough losses. Not everything is going to go your way every point of the season, right? And so you have to be anti-fragile in those moments. You have to allow yourself not to break, just to bend, and then you come back stronger from it. You learn from it, and then you're able to fix those mistakes going forward.
And I'm just amazed at how many different ways Marcus Freeman can sort of weave his message after, there's just these different iterations that we've had after some of these speed bumps and, bumps in the road that have come along the way. And you're absolutely right. You've got to find a way to be resilient and bounce back. And because there is, especially at the point they were at going into USC, between the fact you were playing your biggest rival, and at that point there were still 5 games to go in the regular season, plus no bowl game. Well, I guess, yeah, no bowl game guaranteed yet at that point. There is now. They won 6 games, but there's a lot still to play for, and you can't just let the thing fall apart because you had a couple of tough breaks in a 3-week span. And I am pretty amazed that again that he kind of keeps finding ways not only to weave that message and deliver that message, but then listening to some of the players afterwards, whether it was Sam Hartman or Audric Estime or J.D. Bertrand, Jadarian Price, whoever, some of the guys who came, who stood up there after the game as well, the fact that they continue to be bought into this thing, so I think it's pretty amazing the way that he's been able to do that. And I'm with Stymie. Fragile.
I live about 2 miles from that house.
The Christmas Story house. Have you guys ever been? Did you go there like last year around Christmas time or anything?
It is you can do a tour. There's a really good restaurant across the street, actually, that was on Guy Fieri's Diners, Dive-Ins, and Drives. And so I ate there and then obviously saw it was across the street. But they actually just sold the house, to be honest with you. It went up for actual sale and someone bought it.
Interesting. Okay. Fill in the blank, Jess. It's blank that after Saturday's win over USC, Notre Dame has now gone 21 straight games without a wide receiver having a 100-yard game.
It's mind-blowing to me, and also shows the lack of explosiveness from the wide receiver room at the end of the same time to me. But it's still impressive that Notre Dame finds a way to move the ball downfield in the passing game, even if they don't have a 1,000-yard wide receiver, right? And so last year it was just focusing mainly on Michael Mayer, who was your best pass catcher. And then this year it's just kind of distributing the ball to whoever's, there. And honestly, whoever's been healthy the last kind of, 3 or 4 games. So I think that this problem is actually going to take care of itself relatively soon, assuming, what Notre Dame's, I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, but they have a lot of young, talented wide receivers who are just now getting started. And I have more confidence in these guys going forward than I have of maybe some of these wide receiver rooms in the past.
It is amazing because we are coming up on 2 full calendar years, 2 full seasons since they had a 100-yard receiver the last time. There have been 3. There have been in 2021. Here are the last 3. Do you want to take a guess? You want to take a guess at who the receivers are? Notre Dame's last 3 receivers to have 100-yard games? I bet if I give you 3 guesses, you wouldn't get one of them.
You don't think so?
Give it a shot.
Let's see. I'm quickly trying to go through.
Don't cheat. Don't cheat. I see you looking at your computer. Don't cheat.
I'm looking at a roster. That's all I'm looking at. My first guess was Avery Davis.
Yes, you actually got it on the first guess. He was one of them.
My second guess.
You're cheating though. You're
I'm just
you're
looking at a roster.
Yeah, but still, it's all you've got to do. It's like you look at the roster and you can tell which receivers did it. I'll tell you this: Lorenzo Styles was the last one to do it. The irony of that, Lorenzo Styles, who is now a reserve cornerback at Ohio State, was Notre Dame's last wide receiver to have a 100-yard game, 136 in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State. He was the last one to do it. Avery Davis was one of the 3 to do it that same season in 2021. He did it against Purdue. There was one other wide receiver who had 2 100-yard games that year.
Kevin Austin?
I was going to say, you've looked at the roster. I know you had to know it at that point.
I'm just looking at a roster. It's not like I'm looking at box scores.
Jeez. Yeah, but there are only so many receivers who were even playing that year. Come on.
Refresh my memory of who was wide receiver in 2021.
I mean, look, the tight ends are doing it. Michael Mayer obviously had several. Mitchell Evans and Holden Stays each have one this year. They just haven't been able to kind of put this thing together in the way things were operating early on. You didn't need it. Sam Hartman was spreading the ball around and everyone was kind of sharing the wealth, but between injuries, the emergence of both tight ends, and like Jordan Faison coming around, and like Chris Tyree only gets like 2 or 3 catches a game, and he just doesn't get enough quantity to push it up there. But his yards per catch is up there over 20 yards, I think, still at this point. So I think it's kind of a matter of time, because even like think back to the Central Michigan game. You had 2 receivers in that game have 70+ yard touchdown catches, and they still didn't go over 100 yards in the game. It's just nuts the way things have worked out.
It was fun looking at that 2021 roster because Xavier Watts was still a wide receiver at that point.
He was. That's right. Good point. Fill in the blank. Irish punter Bryce McPherson running down USC punt returner Zachariah Branch Saturday night was blank.
It was extreme athleticism from unathletic punters. And all I could think of during that play was, well, first of all, I thought he was going to score once he broke the edge. And then I just saw the punter come flying out of nowhere, and I was like, who is this? And then once I realized that it was a skinny white guy chasing down, Branch along the sideline, I was like, that's the punter. And all I could think to myself is, this guy's got tremendous speed for being a punter. He's catching one of the fastest guys in the field at full stride. And so, one, he had to take a good angle, but even with a good angle, you got to have exceptional speed to catch up with someone like Zachariah Branch. So again, I was shocked by the athleticism from a position group that is rather known for their unathleticism.
I mean, it is, punters are, as you said, not known for their athleticism. Bryce McPherson's got quite an athletic background, though. He was a really good high school athlete. He was a 2-time state wrestling champion in North Carolina, for starters, which isn't going to make you fast, but,
still athletic.
Athletic and, good athlete, to be a state, 2-time state wrestling champion. He was also a high school defensive end, not just a punter. You don't see that very often, like guys who end up punting at a Power 5 program being a high school defensive end. But he ran track as well. He's his high school record holder in the long jump and the triple jump, and was on a couple relay teams as well. So he really, he surprised me seeing him, because Branch is also a guy with legit speed. He ran an official 10.33 in the 100 in high school. Zachariah Branch did. And to see Bryce McPherson run him down, he was moving. And there were some people who thought that that was Braylon James out there, because they both wear 14, of course.
Yeah.
But of course, as we all know, you can't have duplicate numbers, out there on the special teams. But it was actually Bryce McPherson hauling him down. It was something, man. I mean, he really showed me something, that he was able to make a play like that. So that was
I guarantee 95% of punters in the country aren't making that play.
No, you're absolutely right. And some people said that Pat McAfee needs the clip. Well, Pat McAfee's got a host of producers. If they want the clip, they can find the clip. Or you guys can just cut it and send it to him. He'd love it, I'm sure. Because he's been on
that's proprietary information.
He's been on a Notre Dame love fest here, since
he was the only one to pick Notre Dame against USC. So
Tommy's giving you a hard time now. Know the roster better, he says, shaming you.
Oh, I got to throw out a little stray here, but our boss Brian sent me access to the boards. I was able to get full access to the boards now.
Nice.
And so I was scrolling through and reading some stuff, and I found a little appreciation post. And that's not what I'm bringing this up for. I'm bringing it up because there was one comment in there by none only than DK giving criticism of my boutique hats and not wearing IB apparel. And what do you know? I get an email from Brian last night saying I need to wear more of our IB apparel. So for all the people out there who want to criticize the hats, I brought out a fresh new IB hat today.
All right. All right. I was wondering why you had the IB hat on and not your boutique hat like you were talking about there. So I had to take my hat off. It was starting to itch my head. So that's why I took mine off here in the middle. But I'm glad that you're on the boards now because, I was every once in a while I'll pass something along that I see to you. So I'm glad that you actually have access for the boards.
Yes, and I appreciate the little emails that you send out.
You can take part in the boards as well. So NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is considering playing a Super Bowl in London. Do you buy or sell the Super Bowl overseas?
This is 100% sell for me. This is, the NFL, the National Football League. It is obviously an American-based league. And I think the last thing you want to do to fans is take the Super Bowl away. And I know fans would still watch, but I don't think that you would get essentially kind of a fair attendance from some of these teams. Like imagine your team makes the Super Bowl and it hasn't made the Super Bowl in X amount of years. And then Goodell just randomly decides, hey, we're going to put this Super Bowl over in London, right? Like maybe you wanted to go because your team was there, maybe, this or that. And now you have all these added variables by potentially adding a Super Bowl overseas. There is literally no benefit in this for me. And I think that he'll get a lot of backlash for it ultimately.
Those were my initial thoughts as well. But then here's the other side of it, I think. The Super Bowl is not for the average fan. The Super Bowl is
it's for the elite, kind of.
It is. It really is. It's for the elite. It is all these corporate sponsors. Like I know someone whose dad works for a company who always gets Super Bowl tickets, so he's been to 1 million. But again, it's like he gets tickets through the company. They're the, like corporate sponsor type deal.
It's cool, but they're not emotionally invested in the game.
That's exactly right. It's celebrities and it's corporate sponsorship people who probably make up 80% of the, attendance at a Super Bowl. So really it's like, what difference does it make where it's played? It's in a stadium, it's on TV. Now you're right. Like if your team happens to go and you're thinking, well, I don't care what it's going to cost. I'm going to shell out some money and get me the tickets and I'm going to go.
Or at least be there, right? Like some people will just go hang out around the area, maybe tailgate.
It is a lot harder when you're talking about London as opposed to obviously anywhere in the continental United States. But Roger Goodell, they've played all these games in London for however many years it is now. They played games in Munich last year. They're going to keep playing there overseas. They want that European market. They want it to be a global sport. So they're going to do it. And again, like I agree for the most part with what you're saying. I don't want to see the Super Bowl go overseas, but because of the fact that it is so corporate and it is like so cost prohibitive for the average fan to actually attend these games, it's like, what difference does it make? I'm probably just going to watch every Super Bowl for the rest of my life on TV anyway. So, And for that matter, they play in those soccer stadiums over there in Europe. So they probably even bigger attendance because those soccer stadiums are so big. Last one, fill in the blank. It's blank. The Olympics has officially added flag football as a sport for the 2028 LA Olympics.
It's fun that they've added flag football as one of the Olympic sports. And it's funny that you bring this up because my girlfriend actually brought this up to me and she was like, did you know that they're adding flag football to the Olympics? And I said, no, I didn't know that. But who would be, I guess the biggest takeaway I had from it is who could the Olympics recruit or, maybe the Team USA recruit in order to play for them? Is this more of like NFL guys who are showing up for a 7-on-7, or are they actually recruiting specific flag football studs? Like, because there's got to be like pro-ams and how like there's slow pitch softball tournaments around the country. There's got to be flag football, I guess, gurus or professionals that play across the country. So are you looking at more of that, guys who are in tune to, actual flag football, or are you bringing over some of your top NFL talent and just telling them to basically play 7-on-7? But I guess my takeaway from it is you have to win, because if you're the United States of America, like that's football is the United
Football is your
States.
sport, whether it's flag football or not. That's
Right.
right.
And so I think that's where you have to tread that line lightly of are we doing this thing with the NFL players, or are we doing this thing, with the professional flag football players? And I think this is kind of often what you see the NBA run into is sometimes they don't run their best squads out there. And then, something happens, a slip up, and, the United States is like, oh, well, now we're going to bring our best players, Kevin Durant's going to play, LeBron James is going to play, XYZ is going to play. And it's like, okay, well, why didn't you just do that in the beginning? It wasn't enticing enough. So I think when you introduce flag football as a new sport and you're talking about football, I think a lot of these NFL guys are naturally going to want to do it because they'd like to be an Olympic athlete. They'd like to be, a world-class gold medal athlete. So I would love to see the NFL guys come over and have Tyreek Hill out there, have Jamar Chase out there, have Patrick Mahomes throwing them the ball. Like, I think it would be sweet if the NFL guys decide to do it.
I mean, it would be a huge advantage, obviously, for the United States if they did, since nobody, since there's very little football around the world. But, like I see people, knocking it. Now, they're obviously not going to have full contact football in the Olympics because, for one, you can only play one game per week. And two, again, like you need much bigger people and the whole thing. These two topics really kind of go hand in hand because the NFL was pushing for this, getting flag football in the Olympics. And again, the piggybacking on the topic about a Super Bowl possibly being in London, Roger Goodell and the NFL want more globalization of their sport. They want to be able to sell the NFL around the world. And so that's part of this push, using flag football in the Olympics to get more people, because again, you're not going to have high level tackle football in all these countries right off the bat. They just want more people playing football and being interested in football, and they want to spur more interest around the world. I think what you were talking about, and you went a lot of different ways with your answer, but you're absolutely right. Like, how does the U.S. approach it? Do they go with like former college or NFL players like you're talking about as the guys playing, or do you go with like some of these advanced whatever league? Or do you want me to put this in here? Like I just saw you bring something up backstage.
Yeah.
Do you go with like advanced actual flag football type teams? And, like, do you put together all-star teams, or do you, have a team that kind of advances its way through qualification and that kind of thing to get to the Olympics? Now, what is that? Oh, this is your flag football field. Is that what this is?
Yeah. So I started Googling around. It's 70 yards from back of end zone to back of end zone, 10-yard end zone. So really it's 50 yards, front of pylon to front of pylon. And then you have these like no rush zones. You have areas on the field where you can't run the ball. I don't know. I don't know enough about flag football, so I thought it was a cool graphic to kind of bring up of what's going on.
Yeah. Like the last time I played any flag football was in the Army. So, and that's been a while. And we didn't have like zones where you can't rush and stuff like that. I'm sure in the, in like this higher level stuff, you've got a lot of more complicated rules probably than what we had. But by the way, baseball and softball, along with flag football, have been readmitted as Olympic sports. Both of those were Olympic sports for a while. They took them away. Like the United States dominated in softball for so long. I think that was part of why they ended up taking it away. But they're bringing it back. So baseball and softball and flag football will all be in the Olympics in 2028.
Nice. Excited for baseball and softball to be
maybe
back.
You should gear yourself up. You're in the right age demographic. Get yourself in, like get ready to go. Put together your flag football team. Go be an Olympian.
I'll be an Olympic coach. How about that?
All right.
I'm not moving well enough in space these days to be playing flag football.
That's a lot of that's going around. A lot of people in the same boat. All right, Jesse, great whiteboard stuff as always on this Tuesday during the bye week. Appreciate it. And we'll be back, of course, tomorrow. Vince will be rolling in tomorrow. Haven't seen Vince in a while. I don't even remember. I guess we did countdown, all three of us together last week. I don't remember other than that, the last show that I did with Vince. So
He's
Vince-
back for the first time on a Wednesday in like
I
2
know.
or 3 weeks.
I know it's been me and Sean Davis last couple weeks on Wednesday. So Vince will be back tomorrow, and we will have more Notre Dame football conversation for you. Jesse, I will talk to you later. Everyone else, hit that like button and, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.